Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode, before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Grey's Anatomy Season 1, Episode 9, Who's Zoomin' Who? The episode in a nutshell is just a brief summary of exactly what happens within this episode. George gets syphilis from his new girlfriend. Richard finds out he has a tumor and has an operation in secret to remove it. Christina and Izzy perform an illegal autopsy after one of their patients dies suddenly, and Derek's wife Addison arrives just after Meredith has confided in him about her mom. Once I've rewatched the episode, I rank each episode against each other on two lists, a mostly objective list, which is absent emotion, and then the personal ranking, which is my opinion and emotion. So as always, we start with our mostly objective rank values and our objective list. I've highlighted those I felt applied to this episode. We'll start with the positives. So on the positive side, we have our multi-season supporting character development, which has to do with Richard. Richard, while doing some surgeries, starts to realize that he's had some vision issues. The vision issues, he had noticed his vision going blurry before, but it had gone away. Now it's come back, and he approaches Shepard to do some testing for him in secret, where it is revealed that he does have a tumor on his optic nerve, and Shepard then agrees to do the surgery. And because he doesn't want it getting around the hospital, that's something that he's a patient, that he has a tumor, as he says the vultures will start circling. He then decides to have the surgery in secret, and Derek puts together a team of trusted individuals, including Bailey and Meredith, to do the procedure in secret, which could potentially have led to the chief's blindness, but in the end, he does come out of the surgery well and capable of doing his job. So that multi-season supporting character development is worth 3 points. Next, we have the main relationship developments, which include Christina and Burke, who confirm that they are exclusive, and Meredith and Derek also within this episode, though it doesn't age well, also confirm that they are exclusive. And because it's a small development, both of them together are just counting once, and that is worth 4 points. We then have our multi-season main character growth, which is that Izzy and Christina are trusted by Bailey to perform a procedure to drain fluid from the abdomen of one of the patients by themselves. So when the series first started, all of the interns were able to observe procedures, maybe assist on procedures, but now we can see that they are starting to be able to perform procedures on their own if they are minor or simple procedures. And this is an example of that, showing how they have grown throughout their time as interns in this first season. And that is worth another 4 points. We then have some supporting relationship development, which is Addison's arrival at Seattle Grace Hospital. Addison is revealed to be Derek's wife. Not ex-wife, but his actual wife, right at the end of the relationship. And supporting relationship developments are worth 2 points, which brings us to 13 overall. On the positive side, however, as you might have guessed, there are some negatives in this episode. Firstly, we obviously have the main relationship regression or breakup category. In this case, regression, because it was so at the end of the episode, we don't really have the breakup yet. But obviously, Meredith finds out that she is the other woman, that Derek has been cheating on Addison with her. We don't have the backstory yet. Obviously, as rewatchers, we know that there's more going on, but for the information we've been given within this episode, we don't know that yet. So at this point, Meredith is the other woman. That also implies a broken trust, as Meredith and Derek have just confirmed exclusivity. Meredith also had just started to trust Derek with her mother's condition, believing them to be exclusive. And then just after that happens, bomb dropped, here's Addison. So clearly, that's going to lead to some sort of trust issue. And main relationship regressions or breakups are worth a -3 points. We then have the fact that in this episode, a lot of the episode was focused on the drama between characters, which personally is my favorite part of the show. The medical drama to me is a side piece, but in this case, this episode, all of the patients that were in were mostly forgettable. It was actually kind of shocking when they returned on screen and you're like, oh yeah, they were treating people, weren't they, between all this drama. This episode was very drama heavy, so the patients kind of took a sideline, which makes basically all of their plots pretty weak, and they honestly were pretty forgettable overall, which is a -2 points. And then we get to our final negative for this episode, which was that there was once again some negative messaging and behavior happening. So we basically have, while they were performing their first, like their solo procedure, Izzy and Christina's patient ends up dying of the heart. They knew about the liver disease, they were draining the fluid in the abdomen caused by the liver disease, but they weren't aware of the issue with the heart. The family decides that they don't want an autopsy. And after trying and failing to convince them to change their minds, Izzy and Christina decide to go on their own because they want to know what happens and illegally perform an autopsy. Bailey, of course, finds out. She finds them. She scolds them. She points out that they are committing an actual crime, that it is illegal, that they could lose their jobs, she could lose their jobs, and she's really getting steamed up about giving them that lecture because obviously this is a really serious issue. But then, of course, as this series likes to do, they get off scot-free. Basically, they discover that the heart was enlarged, they realize there's some sediment in the heart, they go through some tests, which Bailey then allows them to do, which they then discover that the father actually had a blood condition that causes iron buildup in the body, and that because it's genetic, they might have saved the daughter's life because they can test her now, and if she does have it, they'll be able to treat it before it becomes any sort of critical concern for her. And because they have managed to find this information through the autopsy, retroactively, the family signs the consent forms, allowing Izzy and Christina to obviously not get arrested and not face any consequences at all for literally breaking the law and going against the family's wishes. Obviously, very negative messaging and behaviors, and even more so because there were no consequences whatsoever to them doing so. And this, of course, is also worth a -2 points, which brings this episode overall to a 6 out of 10 episode for the season finale. Which brings us to our final and definitive ranking of all of the episodes for season 1 of Grey's Anatomy. On our mostly objective list, the rank of the episodes is as follows. In first place, we have A Hard Day's Night. Second place was No Man's Land. Third place, Shake Your Groove Thing. In fourth place, we have Save Me. Fifth place, The Self-Destruct Button. Sixth was If Tomorrow Never Comes. Seventh, Who's Zoomin' Who, which is this episode, the finale. In eighth place, The First Cut is the Deepest. And then in last place, as the worst episode of this season, was Winning a Battle, Losing the War. And now we get to come to the personal ranking. This one is based on my personal and emotional response to this episode. Now, as I mentioned before, for me personally, the drama is what makes the series. That's why I rewatch it. That is why I go back to it again and again. It's not the medical side, it's the characters, their interactions, and all the drama between them. In this episode, there was some drama. So, the main drama that we get that goes throughout the entire episode is that George, at the start of the episode, is in the bathroom holding a book about rashes while examining himself, and he is concerned about it. Izzy makes fun of him, thinking that he's having some fun alone. Obviously, that's not the case. He then decides that he can't get a good enough view himself, so he needs a second opinion. So he goes to Alex in the locker room, who then confirms for him that it looks like he has syphilis. Obviously, George then gets a blood test, goes to gather that blood test, and it is confirmed through the blood test that he has syphilis, which Izzy, who happens to read the blood test, finds out, and everything gets a little bit awkward. But obviously, this whole series of events is also very comedic in nature as well, and leads to some lighthearted and funny moments. We then get to the point where George has to tell his new girlfriend, the nurse that he's seeing, that his test for syphilis came back positive, and he does so rambling in a very George-ish way. I found it personally a little bit annoying because he was going so roundabout, and he like went on for like 2 minutes without even saying what it needs to say, and then at the end he just bluntly says he has syphilis, and she of course runs away from him because shock. Which again, like I find that kind of annoying a bit. But then anyways, how now that he's confirmed syphilis, now that he's told the nurse that she has to get tested, the treatment for syphilis is a penicillin shot, which needs to go in his behind. And at first he goes to Alex to treat him, but then Meredith comes in, offering him some moral support, but then tells Alex that he's doing it wrong, takes the penicillin from him so that she can do it, and of course George is mortified because this was a girl that he liked. Then, of course, just as Meredith is about to put the needle in walks Izzy. And again, she's there for moral support and goes around to watch Meredith put in the needle. But before she can do that, yet again, Christina arrives, and they basically all have a fun time kind of joking around about George while he is mortified. And then they put the penicillin in, and he quickly pulls up his pants and runs from the room. And they kind of laugh about having potentially broken George. It is funny, but I do feel a little bit of pity for George because that is humiliating to him, at least. Then the chief and Patricia, the other staff, they find out that it's not just George and this nurse, that the entire medical staff is they're floozies, really. They're just sleeping around with everybody, and there have been several confirmed cases of syphilis. And so, obviously, Richard gives them a lecture. And then Patricia gives them a safe sex demonstration because clearly, despite being doctors, they don't understand the usage of a condom. And so she gives them a presentation, letting them know how to use one properly. And then to round off this little bit of a saga, everybody in the hospital starts lining up to get tested, and Christina's waiting in line. Bert comes over and confirms for her that she doesn't need to be in that line. There's no one else. Then asks if he needs to be in the line, and she tells him no, and they both exit that line. And then, of course, there's Meredith and Derek, who also not only are confirming that they're only being with each other right now, so they are being exclusive, at least intimately, though we know from when I mentioned it during the objective, they're clearly not exclusive relationship-wise, though Meredith at this point doesn't know that. It's also revealed that they are very safe and somewhat adventurous with their safety options, and so they're not concerned about it, and they also don't need to get tested for it. And then at the final, as the episode is closing off, we have the nurse approaching George and letting him know that when they started seeing each other, she didn't know how much she was going to like him, and she had been casually seeing someone else at the time. George asks who that is, and it is revealed that it was Alex. And this is also funny because then George basically yells at Alex, who was at his locker, that he gave him syphilis and runs over and punches him. And then basically all the other interns kind of have to come over and keep them apart and take George out. But that's one of the few times when George was a little bit more on the manly side, which was nice to see, though also really funny. And thank goodness everybody separated them, because I feel like had the fight continued beyond that first punch, Alex probably definitely would have won. Then I do want to point out, like I mentioned, the patients, they were kind of forgettable in this episode because they weren't the main focus. It was more about the drama. But we do kind of get a theme that went through this episode, and that scene was keeping secrets, or that theme was keeping secrets. So we have obviously Richard's secret vision blurriness, then his secret tests, then his confirmation of the tumor, and the secret operation. So lots of secrets there. We had the secret autopsy, which revealed the liver patient's cause of death was actually a genetic blood disease that his daughter may have had, saving her life potentially. We then get the other patient that was in this episode was Burke's best friend, who had been in the same fraternity as him, has a pregnant wife, and they find a mass in his bladder. They do a biopsy, send it off for testing. Once it comes back, they find out that it actually is an ovary, and that the friend is actually intersex. And so they then remove the ovary, which has grown into the bladder. However, during that surgery, they discover that the friend is sterile. So who got his wife pregnant is the question, and therefore that reveals the secret that she's been keeping, that she's been cheating on him. And then Burke has to decide whether or not he's going to tell his best friend about the fact that this child is not his. The wife, of course, says that he shouldn't tell his friend because why ruin their happiness? Why ruin their marriage? So on and so forth. And I'm on Burke's side here with the friend has a right to know. And it's kind of really a bad look for the wife that she's so adamant about not telling him. Because even if you cheated, knowing now that he's sterile, that you wouldn't have had a child any other way, and if you do plan to raise it together and you're no longer with the other guy, I feel like you could work through it. But you need to let the other person have the opportunity to make that choice of whether they want to work through it with you. Luckily, Burke is also a doctor, not just a best friend, and therefore has to give the diagnosis to the friend that he is sterile, and that has been discovered in his capacity as a medical professional. So he does eventually tell the friend, though we don't really see the outcome between the couple, whether or not they stay together or not, have any conversation or not. We just see Burke delivering the news and his confrontation with the wife before that. Then, of course, we have the secret Meredith's been keeping all season, which is that her mother has Alzheimer's, which she finally decides she trusts Derek enough to reveal. Bad choice. And then we get Derek's secret being revealed, which, of course, is the fact that he has a wife, which is Addison. And then Izzy didn't really have any secrets, and Christina's secret, which is that she is pregnant, did not get revealed in this. We didn't actually hear much about it. The only thing we heard about it really was a phone call early on in the episode about them wanting her to seek counseling to confirm her decision, and her refusing to have that counseling session, having already made her decision. But it's not revealed to any of the other players in the episode, any of the other interns, doctors, etc. So her secret's safe. And then I also want to call out One thing that did rub me the wrong way about this episode was the fact that they got off with no consequences about the secret autopsy. But overall, I really enjoyed the episode. I love that it was more drama focused than medical side focused. I liked all of the revelations, and even some of the negative revelations still added tension, still added interest to the episode. And I have to say, I really, really enjoyed the episode. I think it was a great finale. I liked the cliffhanger that we ended on, even though I usually don't like cliffhangers. But when you are rewatching something, cliffhangers are more bearable because you already know what's going to happen after them. And so I gave this episode a ranking of 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10 because there were some negative aspects, but overall I felt my enjoyment outweighed them by a lot. Which then brings our definitive final rankings for season 1 of Grey's Anatomy on the personal ranking to, in first place, this finale, Who's Zoomin' Who? Second was the self-destruct button. In third, we had Shake Your Groove Thing. Fourth was If Tomorrow Never Comes. Fifth, No Man's Land. Sixth was A Hard Day's Night. Seventh was Save Me. Eighth, Winning a Battle, Losing the War. And my personal least favorite episode of this season, at the bottom of the list, The First Cut is the deepest. And so now we get to enter into our series ranking. In the series ranking, we are ranking each of the seasons against each other. And once we've watched all of the episodes in a season, we're calculating the percentage to find out which of the seasons are the best. And able to put those on a list. We won't know the outcome of this particular ranking until we've completed the series. And as the series is ongoing, that is going to be quite a while. However, with this final episode of season 1, we have a 6 on the mostly objective score, which brings us up to a final score of 70 out of 90. Once we calculate the percentage score of this episode, that gives us a percentage of 77.78% for season 1 as its rating. And then on the personal side, we added 9, which brought us up to 60 out of 90. And that gave us a percentage score or a percentage ranking for this season of 66.67%. And with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Grey's Anatomy Season 1, Episode 9, Who's Zoomin' Who? Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.